Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Ben Crossman, and everyone out there, thank you so much for tuning in. We have a treat for you today because we have the one, the only Marcel Gagne. And, I should have done this before the show, but instead, I think we're going to do it during the show because why not? Everyone, we're going to go ahead and get Marcel on, and hopefully this all works. And of course, hey, it's going to go well. So with that being said, we're reaching out to Marcel Gagne. Of course, he runs Cooking with Linux and the new podcast, which we're about to discuss, Tik-Tek-Toe. And hey, everyone. So before we get started, Marcel, can you hear me? Perfect. And I can hear you, but the ladies and gentlemen can't. So let me just hit the button and welcome you back onto Computer America. How you doing?
I'm doing just fine. I was being quiet so I could be well-behaved. Be a well-behaved,
Unfortunately, no one was able to see it, but I was. That you were mouthing the words. And I was like, everything is going to heck, and I had to quickly fix that. But no, it's working well. You sound good, and yeah. So hey, how have you been?
I've been great actually. It's been I think I finally accepted that the fall has arrived. That was actually a little bit difficult for me. I closed the pool 10 days ago, so it's still a little bit tender, but I think I've slipped into stage 5. The acceptance stage.
Acceptance, so. Right? Yeah, man, it came on like a ton of bricks too, because our studio is here in North Carolina. I think it's supposed to get down to like 30 some odd. Of course, you folks up in Canada, I'm sure, deal with a lot worse. But 30 degrees from like 80 or 90 like a week or two ago. It's
well, for the record, it's actually warmer here than it is there. Then
you outsourced your cold. How dare you? But probably shipped off. But hey, so as I was saying to everyone, before we get you on, Marcel Gagne, longtime Computer America correspondent, of course, runs, operates, and does a lot of great work over Cooking with Linux and a lot of other projects. He has his fingers in a lot of pies, I guess. I don't know if that's the right.
Way too many pies.
Exactly. Well, hey, but you have fun with it. You definitely look like you have fun with it, and hey, we definitely enjoy having you on the show. I mean, just yesterday, I got a couple of messages from everyone out there, because our segments have unfortunately been kind of hit or miss lately, and I got a lot of messages that were like, is Marcel going to be on tomorrow? I need to know definitively, Ben. And I'm like, I will do my best. And hey, yeah, so by popular demand, Marcel Gagne. So hey, welcome back onto the show. And before we get started, why don't we go ahead and give those who don't know you a little introduction into your background?
Well, I'm Marcel Gagne. I'm the Cooking with Linux guy. I like to have fun with Linux and open source software. I've written several books. I've written many hundreds of articles on Linux and open source software. I've been a top 40 radio disc jockey. I have a private pilot's license. I do shows like this. I've done television. I've done radio. I've appeared in various places talking about Linux and open source software. So I guess in a way I kind of enjoy doing this stuff. And I'm a dad with 2 kids, and my wife my wife lets me get away with all sorts of things, including doing this. So it's good. It's good.
Love that she does. Thank her for me when you get a chance. And I will say, if you find a job that mixes all of your past experience, man, that would be really impressive. Although I will say
it would be great if it paid better. I mean, that's really the downside of all this. It's like I'm having fun, but I'm just not.
But I'm not loaded.
Money. Somebody out there wants to fund me,
There you go. I'm not loaded like I was promised. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to put the show notes up after the program today, but it will have a link to everything that Marcel does if you want to check it out and get in touch with him directly. But I will say that before we get into the topic of your new podcast and all these other things going on about Linux, you obviously cooking with Linux, many times on the show you mentioned that you posed as a sommelier, I think is the phrase.
A French chef with the world's second best wine cellar.
That's it. Yeah, and you
at a restaurant called Chez Marcel.
Marcel, and of course, so you could pair the wine of the day with the topic that you wrote about or talk about here on the show. Although looking at, and by the way, the video portion has your show notes up, and of course you can see Marcel, myself, all that good stuff. But if you're watching the video portion, you can see that today's wine is a bit more not a wine, or actually, is it? Yeah, it's in a can, so it's throwing me. It's cider. It's cider.
It's first of all, this is actually one of those. How can I put this? It's not really a vice. It's a bad habit of sorts. Like in the fall, for whatever reason, I mean, I occasionally enjoy it during the summertime, but in the fall, I think this is part of my acceptance strategy. Mm-hmm. I occasionally go out and I try a bunch of different ciders that I haven't tried yet. And I happen to really love apple cider, but I also like, alcoholized cider. Mm-hmm. Fermented cider, slightly more fermented ciders so that we start getting the alcohol out of it. And so it's kind of a thing. So at the moment I've got like 5 or 6 different ciders in the refrigerator, and I'm just sort of, enjoying one here, one there, and so forth. So I decided that today, just to be totally crazy and point out that this is kind of like a fall routine, what I've got something. This is a Growers 1927 dry premium cider. It's actually made in Niagara Falls, Ontario, or in the Niagara region in Ontario, mm-hmm. And it's like about 5.5% alcohol. It's your basic lightly carbonated, lightly fruity as well cider. I mean, one of the things that happens with cider, as you probably know, if you had any cider at all, is that the sweetness tends to go as the alcohol content goes up, so it tends to be less sweet as time goes on. So. It's what it is it's refreshing. It's crisp. It's refreshing. It's kind of nice. It's not like a brilliant cider. In fact, I'm not entirely sure what a brilliant cider is. Like I'm a big fan of Strongbow, for instance. Have you ever had the English Strongbow cider? I have.
I'm actually a pretty big fan of ciders as far as just something that when you don't want a beer or something like that. I mean, ciders are my go-to. I have not though. I've not had that one that you mentioned.
Yeah, I like Strongbow, and Strongbow is actually one of those that have people who. There are very, very few people who are in the middle when it comes to something like Strongbow. They either hate it or they love it, And I kind of love Strongbow. It's incredibly dry. So the amount of sweetness that's left over, like the classic Strongbow that I like, the amount of sweetness that's left over is almost non-existent. Mm-hmm. So it has like this little light apple sort of flavoring in the background, very crisp, very dry. And I count myself among the people who like it. But I know that in here, I had a party during the summertime where I thought, like, I got into the cider thing just a little bit early. It was in late summer. It was like late August or something like that. And I decided that I was going to pick up some Strongbow and share it with everybody that was here. I think I'm the only person in like about 15 people who came over that day who likes the stuff. So
really, the kids didn't like it, huh? That's amazing. That they didn't like Strongbow.
I did mention the alcohol part of it, right? I was trying to keep the kids away from it.
Yes, you did. And of course, so although I will say, just between me and you, the show notes might have to be changed a little bit because it looks like you still have the previous iteration of the red. Today's wine is 2017 Colavini Merlot. So
reload your page, dude. Reload your page. Dude.
Oh no! I see. I clicked like 3 minutes ago. You're right. There we go. There we go. Hey. You're so far ahead of me. You're in the future. So yeah, I mean, luckily, no kidding. I've already had too many ciders. I will say that luckily, here in Asheville's like become this tourist destination for craft beers and craft ciders. There's actually a lot of apple orchards around here and stuff like that, and so a lot of the crafts, kind of. Ciders that I find at restaurants, I'll never find again because they usually just do them for a year. But I don't know. I maybe I'm just too immature, but sometimes I drink cider and I think, I just wanted apple juice. I did not want the cider. But
I get it. And again, I mean, one of the things with cider, like I just said, is that the sweetness tends to drop off dramatically as the stuff ages or as the alcohol content goes up. So if you were expecting to get that, that real apple cider taste, you're not going to get it. So that's actually, but it is refreshing. It's very refreshing.
It's refreshing. It's a definite fall staple, and I think we're ready to get into this. Obviously, and by the way, I don't want to say that Computer America's going to have too many Halloween themed kind of things, but we do have a Halloween themed article coming up. Well, not Halloween themed. It's like the spookiest things in tech, which include things like cyber warfare, surveillance, things like that. We're actually currently in the middle of writing it. I actually have the whole thing up here in the background. And hey, the five scariest things in tech will be published here, hopefully within a day or two. So keep an eye on it.
I look forward to it. I do. We cannot have enough spooky stuff at this time of year.
I thought it was a good time of year, and of course, it's things that I didn't just want to stick to. It's like your identity might be stolen. Oh no! Like I wanted things that were inherently spooky with technology, which you've touched on. On either here on the show or just in your own, Flipboard and blogs and things like that. Tech does have a scary side. It
does.
Yeah.
It does, and I mean, like it's. People have referred to it. It's kind of the Wild West out there. I suppose it is sometimes, but with vampires.
I've seen that movie. It has vampires. So let's go ahead and continue on here with all of these different news.
Shall we? By the way, it's 43 degrees Fahrenheit in Fahrenheit here where I am at the moment in Waterloo. So
bundle up.
If you're below that, well. Sucks to be you, dude.
So, news, rumors, conspiracy theories, and this first one I am more than happy to start with because, hey, I think that obviously a lot of people that listen to the show, if you can listen to it live on the radio, we love that you do that. If you listen to it on YouTube, that's great. But a large portion of our audience is, in fact, the podcast version of the show. I think podcasting in general has become something that is easily accessible, but at the same time, when you find good content, when you find people that you like and they're having conversations, it transforms a commute, a walk, your workout time, and any time that you have time to learn. Podcasts are one of my favorite ways to do it. So I always welcome more. And Tik-Tek-Toe.
Yeah, well, Tik-Tek-Toe, actually.
Yeah, Tik-Tek-Toe, yeah.
Tiktektoe. And the idea behind the title was that, it's a tech show, but Tic-Tac-Toe is a game that you play with two people, so it's a two-person game. Oh. So it was kind of like this two-person game. Like you've got the little logo up there, which is a Tic-Tac-Toe board. Mm-hmm. It's got two penguins. I'm the penguin with the wine bottle. I just want to point that out.
the one that's walking a little crooked. I got you.
Actually, my co-host who looked at the logo the logo is kind of a combination thing. It's gone through like 3 iterations already. Mm-hmm. Anyway, maybe even 4. But he said the penguin at the top is crooked, and I said it's supposed to be.
Absolutely. But of course, so, and you can see here a lighthearted technology podcast with Marcel Gagne. Tell us a bit about your co-host, Evan Leibovich.
Yeah, Evan Leibovich is he's a long-time tech journalist as well. He's actually worked he's worked all over the place. He's one of the guys that works at LPI. He's one of the original founders of the Linux Professional Institute. He has worked with the United Nations. He's in different countries and so forth to extend technology and open standards and things like that. And like I said, he has been a technologist, writing the technology field. He used to be a ZDNet writer a number of years. He used to be in their stable of writers over at ZDNet. And so he has a fairly long history as well. And he has a fairly long history with Linux and open source. And I've threatened, I've actually done like a couple of different podcasts, but this is the first one that's like literally just the two guys talking conversational type podcast. And we thought, hey, it would be fun if we because we will do this. We'll get on and chat with each other, and then we'll talk for like 45 minutes about tech things and and go back and forth. And I said, we should just do this. Like, we should just record this stupid thing. And so I pushed him and eventually he gave in. And now we have 4 episodes in the can. And the idea behind it is it does tend to lean heavily on Linux and open source stuff, but by no means is that the only thing. We've covered things like types of marshmallows that you have in Lucky Charms cereal. Mm-hmm. We've covered Marvel superhero movies. We've covered just all sorts of bizarre things, and it does tend to go all over the place, but it does have as its internal focus. You know how you get some tech shows like not you and me, because we you and I, we're like podcast material as well, because we talk about every little thing. Yeah. But you get some shows where somebody sits there and they talk for like an hour about the latest release of some product. Mm-hmm. And I don't know about you, but like I appreciate those things, and I appreciate that there are people who like them, but my eyes glaze over and my ears glaze over, and I go like, oh dude, I get it.
I always kind of consider those, like, especially reviews or people talking in depth about a particular product. Yeah. Your audience is not the audience you would have if you kind of the format that you're talking about with with Tik-Tek-Toe. Your audience is rather people who are interested in that one product. Like, it's very niche, but it's also appreciated by those who are looking for it.
Again, I have nothing against those. It's just not the kind of show that I like to listen to, or the kind of show that I wanted to do. So when we did this, it was kind of like, we're going to talk about everything. We're going to talk about Linux and open source software. Yes, we're going to talk about open standards. But we've got, like the last episode, we were whining about the high price of telecom. So we were trashing cell phone companies, and so like literally, it's kind of all over the place. We're trying to keep it to like somewhere between half an hour and 45 minutes. I think the last one got closer to like 50 minutes. But so far it's been a lot of fun. We've had some good reviews on it. It's very new. I think we're like I think this is the 3rd week or 3.5 weeks into it. So I invite you to listen to it as well. Subscribe to it on your little podcast app, and anybody else who's out there. We're available on iTunes, on Spotify. We're publishing it through Anchor.fm, so that's kind of the primary location for it. But you can get it on Radio Public and on a whole bunch of places. It's available in a lot of different areas. So, by
the way, just for a heads up, because I still have to correct myself with this, Apple is hoping to kill off iTunes, so Apple Podcast is...
Oh yeah, that's right. It's just called Apple Podcast. Yeah, really, it's the same thing. Apple Podcast. Yeah.
It is.
And also we talked about Dave Chappelle in the last episode. So.
Of course, why wouldn't he be associated with tech and Linux and things? But the only thing that I wanted to add to everything that you just said was that when you talked about the little marshmallows that you got in Lucky Charms, you're aware that you can go on Amazon and buy a 40-pound bag, right? Of just marshmallows.
Oh damn! I did not know that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll pull it up right here on the video portion so everyone can see it there. For $200 or 31 cents an ounce.
Oh my god!
Yeah,
really?
Wow. Amazon will get that to you really quick. So,
yeah. I in some ways that almost seems like something I should do, because my son, who loves Lucky Charms, every once in a while I break down and I buy them for him. Okay. But the trouble is, he only eats the damn marshmallows and he leaves the rest of the cereal behind. It's like, I'm wasting like 3/4 of the box of this stuff because you're only eating the marshmallows. So.
I think you can buy like 1-pound bags that are much more reasonable than a 40-pound bag. So maybe as like a treat, just a little bowl, milk, do your thing. Yeah. So okay. So all that aside, so let's see. Your last one was October 15th. So just like 2 days ago. Recent as heck.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cut off these, so to speak.
Yeah. So are you guys hoping to do like a weekly thing, or just whenever it strikes your fancy, or?
It's kind of whenever it strikes our fancy, but the official desire is to do one every 2 weeks.
Okay,
so,
every 2 weeks.
So we record. We're hoping to record every second Tuesday is the way that we're doing it, and and within a day and a half, like hopefully later the same day, publish the podcast. So that's the idea anyway. Every 2 weeks.
I gotcha. Very, very cool. And hey, happy that you could do that. And I really do hope that you guys have a lot of fun with it. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move on to the next topic here.
Let's continue, shall we?
Go for it. Microsoft, always Linux's favorite topic.
Yeah. Microsoft is interesting in so many ways, not just because they're like a massive mega corporation, but also partly because they've been a thorn in the side of Linux and open source, or they were for years. In fact, the famous Steve Ballmer "Linux is a cancer" rant is still fresh in the mind of some people. But what's interesting is that they put it, they started doing this Microsoft loves Linux logo thing just a few years ago to show that they support it, and now Microsoft is part of the Linux Foundation. Richard Stallman, who we'll cover in a few minutes, who was kind of like the one of the original saints/sinners of open source, the guy who started the GNU Foundation, the Free Software Foundation. He went and spoke at Microsoft about a month ago. And Linus Torvalds, I should actually find that link. Linus Torvalds, like 2 or 3 days ago, Linus says Microsoft is okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he actually went publicly stated, and he said, no, Microsoft is cool. They're a big participant in Linux and open source software. So not only is Microsoft saying they love Linux, they like the article that I linked to here in Forbes on Forbes.com. Talks about that. They're going out of their way to say we are part of the Linux community. We are in fact, they're calling themselves an open source company now, which is really fascinating. So,
yeah. So, and of course, all this being said, I mean, Microsoft is an open source company. The one big glaring signpost is the fact that Microsoft's Windows 10 operating system, is it open source? Because I know that you can contribute to it. I know that you can do that, but I don't think I haven't seen a Microsoft 10 KDE fork or anything like that. Like, are they really open source?
No, they call themselves an open source company because think about it, their entire Azure infrastructure runs on Linux now.
Yes.
They have their own Linux distribution. They have their own in-house Linux distribution for these sorts of things. There's a quote in here that's interesting, and I say with my hand on my heart in a very serious way. Can you say that? Can you put your hand on your heart and be serious? I don't know. We're an open source company. We're committed to open source. We're committed to Red Hat, and we're committed to continuing our engagement and our support to a broad open source community through a range of technologies, not least of which GitHub is one. And we're going to talk about GitHub again in a few minutes here. But what's interesting about all that is that it seems to be this kind of transition, and like right now, the command.com, the old command.com and the pro versions of Windows is actually the Linux bash shell, the Linux board shell. Now it has been replaced. So bit by bit, open source pieces are sneaking their way into Microsoft. If you think about it, the SSL layer is OpenSSL. It's an open source project. The new browser that they've created, and I don't remember what it's called. It's not Edge.
I think it's just Edge Chromium.
Oh, is that what it is? Yeah, it's built on Chromium. It's the open source version of, the Chrome browser is mostly open source with a few googly things tossed in. But the Chromium browser is a fully open source browser, and Microsoft has built their new browser on top of that open source software. So they're a member of the Linux Foundation in good standing. They paid money to be part of the Linux Foundation. Mm-hmm. They are using open source software. They have an open source network. They have an open source browser. They have an open source command shell. And honestly, I would be surprised. I don't know if it will happen, but I would be surprised if something like Windows 11 didn't appear someday as being a Linux distribution with the classic Microsoft graphical environment over top of it. Not KDE or GNOME, but like the thing that people have gotten used to seeing on a Windows desktop, except that under the surface, the entire operating system is Linux. I would be really, really surprised if this didn't happen, if not with Windows 11, with Windows 12. And the reason for it is they're heading in that direction anyway. And financially, and from a support perspective, it would be a really, really smart move for Microsoft to do this.
So you said financially and from a support perspective. I mean, the support perspective, that's something that Microsoft has obviously struggled with since Windows 95, is that they get these operating systems that are adopted and no one ever really wants to transition away from them. So they find themselves at least doing security updates to them 15 years later. And as a company, they don't like supporting their old stuff because it's a drain on resources and it doesn't really.
It's written in a way that it's this like giant, 65,000-pound gorilla that's in the room that you're trying to work with. And like if I turn on, like we have a PC in here that dual boots. And if I turn it on because I need to work in Windows for whatever reason, like I'm supporting a client or something like that, it takes sometimes forever just to be able to use the damn thing. You're waiting for it to start. It tells you that it's got some patch that it needs to load. You might as well leave for the day because that's how long it's going to take before you can actually use the PC again. I'm serious. I'm not kidding here. Whereas I have been working with Linux since on my desktop officially, uniquely since 1994. And I never wait to use it. Even if there are updates running in the background, I can actually use my system. And doing an update doesn't require this weird, sacrificing animals to gods and stuff like this.
Right.
To be able to update your operating system, you just upgrade it. Yeah. It's not that complicated.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of my point, was that if they were to open source their operating system, then that support wouldn't be wholly on their engineers. They don't want to give up everything that is, Microsoft with Windows 95 and XP and so on and so forth. But I think that those operating systems could still be, they probably are still being used today, just not effectively, but they could still be used and updated today if it had that community of enthusiasts around it.
Well, yeah, but this would be something that would happen going forward with whatever that first release of Microsoft Linux happens to be.
Right.
This just seems like a natural progression to me, given everything that's happened.
My question to you, and by the way, Marcel, since you last been on the show, as much as we love our advertisers, we did away with the mid-roll segment, so it's now just an hour of content. So you're welcome, everyone. So with that being said, there's no break coming up. Just to give you a little heads up here, and I will say my own question is that for Microsoft, why is this the better financial move? Because they already have like 90% of the desktops, and they're already they're already in position. How is having an open source that they still have to spend just as much to develop, that they still have to spend just as much to do everything to develop as they would a closed source version? Where's the incentive there to make an open source version? I know you said things like support and update and things like that, but I'm saying, is it from like their OEMs? Is it from the community of users and software developers? I mean, where is the real incentive to do this?
Well, first of all, I mean, Microsoft is a company that's looking to make money. And if you're going to deal with customers that work in a variety of environments, and by a variety of environments, I mean things like, my Chromebook here, and
Right.
and an Android phone and an iPhone and a Mac and a Linux desktop and servers running God knows what out there on the internet. You have to be able to speak a common language. You have to be able to work with all of those things. And Chromebooks may not be the biggest desktop environment out there, but they're everywhere. They're in elementary schools and secondary schools and colleges and universities. People lug around, and I won't say lug because a Chromebook, typically speaking, is this ridiculously light thing
Yeah.
that runs for like 10 hours on a battery charge. I mean, it's an exceedingly common device. So Microsoft can no longer hope to say, I'm going to crush all the competition.
Sure.
And they know that they will lose people that way. So if you can extend your services to work with everything else that's out there, I think that that's financially a smart move to begin with. Like, let's say that almost everything in the cloud, and by the way, this is the truth, almost everything in the cloud runs on Linux. And you've decided, no, for our cloud computing environment, we will only offer Windows. You're going to lose like 99% of everybody out there that wants to run something on the internet. So it's a smart move to support and be part of that organization. And something I used to explain a long time ago, and this is like a long time ago, but I used to explain this to people, like pretend for a second that you were a company. Like I know word processors have existed forever, okay? Mm-hmm. But just pretend that you wanted to write a word processor from the ground up, okay? And you budget now $10 million and 2 years worth of development and all these people to create this word processor. All right. Or you could say, I've done some code, like I've created the beginnings of this code out there. I have a code base for a word processor that is going to do the job. And now what you say is, I'm going to ask 1,000 companies to chip in $1,000. To each become part of it and include, and for that matter, I'll invite, anybody that wants to contribute code to it and be part of this and so forth. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden you create your $10 million tool that you need for, 1,000 because you've just, you've put in this money, but you've shared the load among a lot of other people. You're not just sharing the wealth in this case, you're sharing the cost of doing business.
I see.
The cost of building what the tools that you need. So, I mean, it's a sound financial decision. Trying to take over the world is expensive. I mean, one of the reasons that you don't have a lot of wars of conquest today, okay, is because it's not about physical resources. I mean, okay, people still go out and, and have wars and kill each other over ideology and stuff like that. But when was the last time you heard about, just, going out purely to capture large swaths of land, for resources and to put all those people to work? It's not necessary anymore. We're in a world with ridiculous amounts of resources available everywhere, not just in one place. It's cheaper to just buy it from the next country than it is to take over the country, build up a huge armed forces, get yourself, however many hundreds of thousands of people killed. That's bloody expensive. Like, you don't want to do that crap. What you want to do is take advantage of the fact that it's cheap to buy it from some other country and just have it shipped over. Like, you don't have to do all this work of building up an army and training and attacking people and so. Who cares? You might do that for theological reasons, but for resource reasons, you're not going to do that stuff because the world, and this is, I realize that there are poor people in the world, like, and I'm not denying any of that, but the world has an insane amount of wealth in this century, an insane amount of wealth, which is why people are arguing about, the universal basic income will destroy the world. No, it won't. We've got like tons of money, tons of resources. This is not a problem.
Yeah, I
is either free or nearly free. So why not take advantage of it?
I will say that I had that conversation, and this is completely off topic, but I had this conversation with a friend in my spare time. I've known him for a long time, and I had a real hard time explaining to him that he's like, where's that money going to come from? It's, money doesn't just come from anywhere. And I said, that's what increased productivity means, is that you get more value, you get more money out of the same amount of work. Like, there is money magically coming out of nowhere, but it's called productivity, increased productivity, so on and so forth. That's where it comes from. So I've had that conversation. Yeah.
Are you familiar with, I realize that you said, topic, whatever that means. Are you familiar with a writer/historian named Yuval Harari?
I am not.
Okay, he's the author of a book called Sapiens, and his second book was called Homo Deus. Brilliant thinker, great writer. You should actually check him out. But he talks about money as being a myth, a story that we tell ourselves, okay? Because, and the way he puts it is, I don't have any dollar bills because I just have plastic. But he says, like, take this dollar bill, for instance, okay? Mm-hmm. It's just a piece of paper. It has no value, okay? But we all subscribe to a collective fantasy, like we all agree that this piece of paper is worth, $1, and this one with a slightly different ink configuration on it is worth $20. And this one, which has words in different places and a couple of other different numbers, is now worth $1,000. As though somehow this piece of paper has magically transformed into $100 worth of resources or $1,000 worth of resources. It's a collective myth. It's a collective fantasy that we all subscribe to. And yes, it has made the wheels of society go round. It has helped us build up things and so forth. But at one time, money was tied directly to resources. Okay, there was as much money and as much wealth as there were actual resources, but it hasn't been the case for hundreds of years.
And thank goodness, because if I had to figure out how to control 1,000 sheep to trade to fix my car, I don't know how I would do it. It's a representation of resources, and
exactly, we certainly wouldn't have the world we're living in. We wouldn't have all the cool things. We wouldn't be having this conversation over an internet connection from one side of the country to another.
Yeah, of course not. So, okay, yep, that's definitely off topic. And there you go. There's the book, by the way, for anyone out there who wants to check that out. So back to Microsoft, this whole thing, open source. I don't know if they're going to do, clearly they are willing to utilize Linux for the good aspects of what they do. If they will go full blown and embrace all the values that go along with that, maybe if they, become more involved with the Linux community, and, you mentioned that they bought into a couple of the, of the boards and the, the people that, I forgot what they call.
Linux Foundation, yes.
The foundations, there we go. The Linux Foundation. Maybe they will. I don't know. It's just hard to think of a Windows 11 because Microsoft has always said Windows 10 is the last one. I never thought it'd be true, but I don't know what it would look like, and I don't know if it looked like Linux.
Yeah, I don't even know what's going to happen. I upgrade my Linux desktop and so forth, but I know lots of people who use Chromebooks. Yeah. Who honestly don't give a damn what operating system it's running. They've got a web browser that comes up that connects them to the internet. They receive email, they watch videos, they play in the odd game here and there.
Of course.
And if they want, and to play games, they have like a gaming console, or like me, I have an Oculus Quest in the living room, I was playing Beat Saber just before we got online.
Really? That is such a cool game. I've not played it. I want to play that Beat Saber so bad. It looks like so much fun to do that in VR. And yeah.
After the show, you and I have to find out what you got as far as a VR headset. We got to link up in virtual space.
I'm actually looking at investing, or at least upgrading, I should say, to a Pixel 4. So soon. So hopefully something, like that. But
what's that to do with VR though? That doesn't have anything to do with VR.
Well, no, but they have the headsets and you can drop the phone in.
They don't. It's over.
Yeah, Daydream did get. Yeah.
They just killed Daydream. It's over. Standalone VR headsets like the Oculus Quest are the future, baby.
Yeah, and so is PlayStation and PlayStation VR and stuff like that. Which
standalone, baby, standalone.
Really, you don't count PlayStation VR standalone?
What's that? Sorry?
You don't count PlayStation VR standalone? It's too tied in with PS4?
Yeah, it's too tight. Yeah, it's too tight. Okay. Yeah, it doesn't count. I'm sorry.
Okay. So, and by the way, before we move on to the next topic about Mr. Richard Stallman, Two things I wanted to mention just off the top of my head. One, we've talked about Chromebooks and things like that, which keeps bringing up in my head. Yesterday here on the program, we talked to Google themselves about everything that they made over at the, hey, Chromebook, check that out. And we talked to Google, very, very light. He can do that with one hand. Either that or he's incredibly strong. I will say that we talked to Google about everything that they announced over at Made by Google 2019. So if you want to check that out, and hey, kind of to your point about video games, Stadia is coming out, I think, like November 19th. So you know how you said that consoles and things like that?
You know what?
Yeah?
You know what? I'm a sucker. I paid for the Founders.
The Founders what?
The Founders kit, the Stadia Founders kit. So I actually paid for the pre-release. Where you get the special controller, the special blue steel controller, and so. Yeah, I caved. I totally caved.
There you go. And hey, I honestly hope that it lives up to all expectations. I can't wait to try it when it comes out myself to try it.
Maybe we should do a special show just on the Stadia. What do you think?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a technology that's been around before, but it failed because it wasn't good enough. So I'm hoping Stadia is good enough this time around and sticks around. So I will say that. And the other one was just a fun little anecdote that we ordered pizza last Friday. Friday night's pizza night, and
that's true. Friday night is pizza night.
Every family. But I will say that. The driver, he kind of pulled up to the house, and we have a picture of a car hanging in our garage, which is obvious. And he's like, I don't know anything about cars, but give me a computer and I can do anything with it. And we had that conversation where he was clearly busy doing his job, so he was walking away, but I was still talking to him. And he's like, oh yeah, I've been using Linux since 1993 or something like that, and I have special distributions that I made that he goes to recycling centers and thrift stores and things like that, slaps on his own personal distribution, and his hobby is fixing up computers for other people. So
I like this guy.
I met one of them in the wild, and there you go. So that's my anecdote. Why don't we go ahead and continue on, because wow, we are moving at the speed of snail. Richard Stallman, what's the story?
All right, let's just talk about Richard Stallman. Richard Stallman has a history of inappropriate type comments. Anyway, he's a very polarizing figure, to say the least. But he wrote something that sounded like it was a support of Epstein. Okay. Yeah, exactly. And that was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back, which is amazing, actually, because he's been pissing people off for decades now. And somehow this was the thing that pushed it all over the edge, was this email saying, well, maybe Epstein wasn't such a bad guy or something like that. You can go and read the letter because it's all online and so forth. But anyway, when that happened, there was like a huge blowback as a result of that. And one of the people who worked at MIT wrote something. I think she published it on Medium or something like that. The thing went viral. And a couple of days later, Richard Stallman resigns from MIT, the artificial intelligence, the Center for Artificial Intelligence at MIT. And, I could be totally wrong, but in this case, I think resign is asked to resign. Yeah. But he also resigned from the Free Software Foundation, which decided that, they just really didn't need that kind of publicity anymore. Thank you very much. However, Stallman is still the head of the GNU, the GNU's Not Unix, or the GNU.org. Although even there is some pressure now saying, Richard, you have done a great deal for this community. You've done a great deal for open source software. He's one of the original architects of the GPL, the GNU Public License, General Public License, on which a lot of things in the open source world, including Linux, is based. They said, thank you for your contribution, but it's time for you to ride off into the sunset. So we'll see exactly where that goes at that point. But there is growing pressure to basically have him walk away from all this stuff. And I want to make it clear, it's not like Stallman has been found guilty of, stuff like Epstein or something like that. But just the idea that, a few years ago, he wrote something where he basically said, is pedophilia really such a bad thing?
The answer is yes, by the way. Anyone listening to the show, the answer is yes. Yes. But
the answer is absolutely yes. But, he wrote something which, basically made it sound like, what if the kids are into this? It's like, dude, it's just bad. Okay?
Yeah, it certainly sounds so. And by the way, I just wanted to also recall when this whole Epstein thing happened a month or two ago. Time's flying incredibly fast and incredibly slow at the same time. My sense of when things happened is so blown out of proportion. I will say though that there was another professor from MIT that also came out.
Yes.
Not really in support of Epstein, but just saying, I guess as like a character witness, saying Epstein's not that bad of a guy. And I got to say that, as the article points out here that you linked to in The Verge, Epstein was a huge supporter of MIT in general. Yes. So I feel like there's some level of biasness.
In some ways I can see MIT or people at MIT trying to deflect some of the criticism. I mean, there are people who are distancing themselves, like Trump always does, like his closest friend and the guy who was working with him during the election campaign. I never knew the guy. I just never met him.
And then there's a picture.
Every freaking day, dude.
Yeah.
I never met him. Anyway, you're getting the same thing with Epstein. You've got all these people now that are saying, well, I didn't really know the guy. Like even Bill Gates, who's now a poster child for philanthropy, and helping disadvantaged people and trying to cure malaria and things like this. He knew Epstein. They had hung out more than once.
You don't become a multi-billionaire and have that level of influence without meeting people and having a lot of influence. And I think that's what this is, where, his personal views aside, it seems like this is someone that had, if nothing else, a professional relationship with Epstein. And I could see how he would try to, like you said, kind of deflect some of the blame. And CSAIL, we've had professors on the show from CSAIL and from MIT cover a lot of research going on there. They're very smart. They're very smart people, but I guess not everyone. Maybe, I don't know. No offense.
Well, the thing that's funny about all this is, and this is just an observation. But by the way, I never knew Epstein. We were never close.
Of course. Me either. Go ahead.
I had to do that. But anyway, the fact of the matter is, the fact that something comes, like if you found out that your next door neighbor had, I don't know, killed the high school teacher down the street, would you suddenly say, well, they were never my next door neighbor? It's like, no, they were next door. They turned out to be a killer, or they turned out to be a schmuck, or they turned out to be this and that. But it doesn't, it doesn't change the fact that at some point you had a history with these people. It doesn't mean that you're guilty.
Yeah.
Like you're not
or even that you're supportive
because you lived on the same street as somebody who committed a crime.
Right. The only solution to that I've seen play out, on TV is that you have to go on and say, I had no idea, and you had to sit in front of a camera and provide nothing and take up time.
He was quiet. He was quiet, kept to himself.
He's quiet and kept to himself. We never saw this coming. Who knew? So with that being said, and so the Free Software Foundation, as you mentioned, also resigned from that. I'm sure that something like this, there is a way out of it, but I feel like some of the things that you mentioned here and some of the things that he's written, he is not going to have the, I don't want to say presence of mind, but he's not going to have the inclination to get his way out of it, because there's a way to kind of say, I unequivocally don't support this kind of crap, and let's just move on in a professional manner. He has a personality.
It is possible to do that. And anyway, moving on.
Let us.
Believe it or not, on the similar topic, we're not going to cover everything today, Harry. On a similar topic, okay, there was a big thing recently where a programmer decided to remove his software from, actually, he didn't remove it. Did he remove it from GitHub? He wanted to block ICE, as in the, I keep forgetting.
The Immigration Customs Enforcement Office.
Thank you. Immigration, Custom, and Enforcement. The people in the States that lock up the children in concentration camps at the border. Those guys. Isn't that those guys?
That's the one.
Okay. All right. Anyway, so those guys. So basically he said, dudes, I totally do not support what you're doing here. And I am totally against you using my software. So I'm totally going to remove it. And I don't want you guys using it ever again. Okay. And the problem, of course, is that The problem is that it is free software available on GitHub. Okay, and everyone technically has, like, by the words of the license on which this is based, and I do want to jump down to the 4 freedoms in a moment here,
Sure.
which, by the way, does bring up Richard Stallman again because he wrote them. But the 4 freedoms of open source software, actually, let me read them out now, just because they're important to this discussion. A program is free software if the program's users have the 4 essential freedoms. Here they are. Number 1. The freedom to run the program as you wish for any purpose. Okay, that one is particularly important. Number 2, the freedom to study how the program works and change it so it does your computing as you wish. Access to the source code is a precondition for this. Number 3, the freedom to redistribute copies so that you can help your neighbor. Number 4, the freedom to distribute copies of your modified versions to others. By doing this, you can give the whole community a chance to benefit from your changes. Access to the source code is a precondition for this. If software is licensed in a way that does not provide these 4 freedoms, then it is categorized as non-free or proprietary software. Now let's go back to that first one.
Sure.
The freedom to program as you wish for any purpose. So what this person is arguing is, I never agreed to making my free software, which again is licensed in a way that covers these 4 freedoms. Okay, I never agreed for that software to be used to help out an organization like ICE. Mm-hmm. Or ICE. Do they call it ICE or ICE?
It's definitely ICE. ICE.
Oh, okay, it's definitely ICE. Okay, I never signed up for this. Well, yet technically you did. And that leads us, like, so that story is actually quite interesting. The idea that, like, can you as a developer decide who gets to use your stuff if you've made it available free to everyone?
So yeah, and to kind of further make your point for why he felt vindicated or validated in doing this, he said that Chef, the company, was including a third-party software package that I owned. It was my own personal repository on GitHub and personal namespace on Ruby Gems. But that kind of says it right there, where he's trying to claim his little corner of someone else's service, such as GitHub or Ruby Gems, and I can't go to, let's say, like Google and say that this is my Gmail account. Google has no right to say what I do with my Gmail account. It's like, it's yours, but it's not yours.
Yeah, and once, like I said, once you've made the software available, now he is free to take his code and relicense it differently going forward. Okay, going forward. But up until this point, the software has been available for free, and ICE or whatever organization, Chef, is free to fork that software to create another version of it, a new version going forward that they use at that point. And the thing that, like, we discussed this in the podcast in I think excruciating detail. One of the things that is difficult with that, pretend for a second that the programmer of OpenSSL, I think there are like 3 lead programmers who created OpenSSL. OpenSSL is used in every secure transaction on the internet. Like when you shop at Amazon, when you send an email, when you use an encrypted communication. When
you go to computeramerica.com. Yeah.
Exactly. When you go to your bank, to do your banking online, all that stuff uses OpenSSL. Okay. So what if all of a sudden the lead developer said, Amazon is evil? They are. I mean, there's no question that Amazon is evil, despite the fact that I have an Amazon Prime membership and I get something delivered like practically every day from Amazon. Mm-hmm. They're still evil. I just want to make that clear. Okay. Jeff Bezos, by the way, I read something recently. Do you know how long an average American making an average salary would have to work to make as much money as Jeff Bezos has?
Well, to not belabor the point, I think it would take a couple of thousand lifetimes.
Yeah, you're getting there, actually. You would have to go back to the days of the dinosaurs pre-asteroid impact, okay? So you'd have to go back at least 70, 80 million years and work at your current salary for 70, 80 million years to make as much.
So I
as
wasn't even close. I was off by a factor of 100 or 1,000. Okay, nice. Okay.
Yeah. So the idea that one person can be a self-made 100 billionaire is absolutely freaking insane. But anyway, I digress. So what's happened since then is that this person, and let me bring up her name, and I apologize to her because I never remember her name. But she is one of the authors behind some code of conduct stuff that's over on the internet. And I'm not going to find it, am I, without keeping my head directed the whole time. Oh, sure. There it is, Hippocratic license. I actually have it right in the show notes. Marcel, pay attention to your own show notes, dude. Anyway, so she came up with this thing called the Hippocratic license. You're familiar, of course, with the Hippocratic Oath, right?
Yes.
Like the oath that
for
doctors take.
Yeah. Do no harm.
And what they do is like the doctors have this Hippocratic Oath that basically says first do no harm. That's actually the thing. Above all, do no harm.
It's like do no harm, and if you have the ability to help, you have to render help. Yeah, things like that.
Yes, you have to render help and so forth. It starts out in Latin. In Latin, it's primum non nocere. Above all, do no harm. And the idea is to create a license that says that if anyone who agrees to use your product, okay, must basically agree to do no harm. And I think that this is actually more of a thought experiment than anything else. Like, I don't know how serious anybody is taking this, or if anybody would actually license. But the problem that I see with this is, how do you define doing harm? Okay, as my grandpappy used to say. Actually, he never said that, but as more than one person has observed, everything eats something else. Okay,
it's and sorry to step on you here, but it's just hard to imagine that the people who are making the back end database that's going to, I assume that his software was used in some way to help detain or catch people or something like that. Whatever part his software actually contributed to the overall efforts of ICE, I doubt that the people developing his program on GitHub, that they're also the ones actively doing harm or even partially contributing to it. Like, I feel like the ones who are developing the software are so far removed from the ones who are, most people would consider doing the harm to others, I guess.
Well, here's another way to look at it, okay? And I realize this is like, this is going to be like way out there, okay? Let's talk about the Chinese secret police. I'm sure they have a secret police that rounds up people. They're at work in Hong Kong and so forth. Let's talk about these people for a second, okay? And let's consider the possibility that some of those people have a Gmail account. I don't know if they do, but I'm just creating a scenario here, okay? Mm-hmm. Let's pretend that they have a Gmail account. Do you then say, because someone who works in a business that I don't like, so this person works in a business that I don't like, I'm going to, I'm not going to allow them to file their taxes online. I'm not going to allow them to send an email using my email package. I'm not going to allow them to write a letter to their grandmother using a word processor, because they work for a company that does this kind of nefarious, whatever the heck it is that we're concerned about. I think it's something that is completely unenforceable. Okay, because you're going to have to define what harm is. All right, and one person's harm is another person's. Well, we had to do this, for the greater good. Mm-hmm. And you might think that this particular thing is good, whereas somebody else thinks that it's destroying the environment or something like this. I mean, like I don't want to do this. There are good points on both sides. No, sometimes one side is completely batch crazy, and their point isn't worth considering. But the idea that trying to measure whether you're the user of some service or product or whatever is evil or using it for bad purposes. It's like buying a car. It's like, are you a getaway driver or are you just somebody trying to take their kids to school?
We have definitely had that conversation with everything from not here on the show, because I'm not looking to get into a conversation about guns, but everything about guns to a conversation we did have on the show, which is the Onion, the Tor browser, the dark web, things like that.
Dark web.
Exactly. And it goes back to this idea of these are tools, these are objects, how they were used, that's a conversation to have. But, does the blame lie on the tool, the maker of the tool, or the user of the tool?
Well, the case of a gun is a little bit more obvious because, it's being used to shoot somebody. Okay, so, a gun is a tool with a very specific purpose. However, saying the person who works for this company that is, I don't know, employing children in Siberia, I'm making stuff up, obviously,
right,
should not be allowed to use my word processor because I don't like what they do for a living. Like, how do you even police stuff like that?
Yeah, and
ICE is a simple part because they're like this big, massive organization doing evil things. But how can you police it at an individual level? It's just nuts. You can't do that.
You really can't. And I will say that, Marcel, we are really about flat out of time. My music is playing in the background so softly.
Oh, no, we're not done yet.
I know we're not done yet. So hopefully, we'll come back next month, and I don't know if there's any more that we can expand on this topic. We can talk about your next distribution. We can talk about Stadia next time you're on, and we'll have to double check, make sure the holidays work for you and work for us. But Marcel, I want to thank you so much. If people want to find out more, where should they go?
Well, actually, probably the easiest thing is just you can go to marcelgagne.com, which is my website, or on Twitter, I am WFTL, which is writer and free thinker at large. Or you can go to youtube.com/freethinker@large, which is my YouTube channel where I've got a bunch of things on. Well, I got all sorts of interesting things, including Linux and open source and gaming. Or you can check out my new podcast, TIC-TEK, as in tech for technology, -TOE, Tik-Tek-Toe.com.
Perfect. And again, links in the show notes. Everyone, have a great day. Marcel, everyone, thank you so much.
Cheers.
Bye-bye. Cheers.